Hello, my name is Ashley Goddin, and today I will be talking about high strings in Italy. One of the biggest things I wanted to start by talking about was the making of the instruments. The city of Brescia was considered the birthplace of the violin. In the 17th century, the city of Cremona became the head of the violin world, which was just a little bit east of Brescia, and it was like maybe 25 miles away. In the era between 1510 and 1560, the most important luthiers were the Dalla Corona family, and the most important luthier probably to ever exist now is Antonio Stradivari. He made 1,116 instruments, and 960 of them were violins. The violas that he created were now sell at almost double of what the violins sold at, because there are only 11 of them that survive today. Stradivarius violins were so phenomenal because of the craftsmanship that he put into them. He selected the finest wood to go into the instruments. He used pine for the front and sides and maple for the back. He paid expert attention and detail when working on the back of the instruments, and would pay expert detail to carving the wood because the instrument is not flat but round. So he would make sure the angles were 100% accurate so that he would get the most beautiful resonance of sound, because even if it was a slight bit off, it could affect how the instrument performed. Compositions later began to feature these beautiful instruments because people started realizing that, wow, these are amazing, I need to put these into something, because at that point, people wanted to show off the instruments. One of the first composition styles to kind of come along with that was the sonata. It was a work that featured several movements that contrasted in tempo, meter, and affect. The contrasts were because of the theory of affections, which wanted the music to simulate bodily humors and keep them in balance by offering a variety of moods. Arcangelo Corelli wrote a trio sonata that I'm going to play now because I feel like it really highlights how a lot of these instruments were wanting to be used, especially like being featured in these kinds of things, because people really enjoyed watching that. That's just a little excerpt from that. It features two violins, a harpsichord, as well as a viola da gamba type of instrument, kind of an old school cello looking thing. That was mainly focusing on the two violins. Everything else was kind of background, trying to keep with that because they were the main show of that. Another form that I think is important to talk about is the instrumental concerto and how they compose these kinds of things. It was the most prestigious type of Baroque instrumental music and helped establish the orchestra as the leading instrumental ensemble. It would combine texture with other different traits that were featured at the time, such as florid melody over a steadily moving bass, musical organization based on tonality, along with multiple movements in which contrasting tempos and moods and figuration. One of the important composers that I think is important to talk about is Vivaldi, mainly because he was kind of the first person to start really writing for this. He was the first person to start dividing the strings into their groupings, which is having a first and second violin and then viola, cello, bass, instead of just having violin, viola, cello, bass. The bass would be doubled on with the cellos, but the violin and viola would be split into two different sections, which kind of offered more of a melodic line to be moving in both of those sections. He was able to demonstrate colors of these instruments with experimentation that he did on his concerto works. But I'm going to play one of his, this concerto. It's called Concerto for Violin and Orchestra in A minor, Opus 3, number 6. That's just a little showing of that. You can obviously see that the solo violin is kind of the feature thing there. The viola is kind of there as well as a melody with it, and then the cello and basses were kind of serving as that figured bass at the bottom. This style would typically differ with other countries because in Italy, most of the written things had ornamentation on it, and there's other countries such as in France, they only had one musical center. In Italy, there was multiple, and in France, that one musical center where composers were forming new ideas in many other places. Many composers really believed that their music should be a blend between all different forms of music, and Italian style generally came into form with those other styles, but there was still a lot of different things that would continue to be there. Countries tried to imitate the ornament passages based on the sequences, the use of walking bass lines, and the circle of fifths harmonic progression, because that was kind of what Italian style was. In France, on the contrary, though, they would have these kind of dotted rhythm passages, which was a very French style, as well as triades, which was a fast scale fingering. Overall, Italian high string music was very different from what else was going on, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast.